Hello. So, we are going to be talking about how to tackle your shit weeks. Now, we all have these, everyone. Like, it's literally physically impossible to avoid these. So, the way you can kind of view it is you tackle it head on or you let it consume you. Now, I came up with this handy little acronym / cycle thing to kind of help you run through like a couple of processes in order to manage when you have shit weeks where, you know, your Monday's not gone quite right and you feel like you're going to write off the rest of the week, or you've had a really bad day, or, you know, work have asked you to stay late and it's going to just completely throw, or you've encountered something that's going to completely throw your routine into flux. Because the thing about shit weeks is, more often than not, it's actually just one shit day. And then essentially you have that one shit day, you feel like you failed, you write the rest of the week off, and therefore what was actually really only one shit day has then turned into a shit week. Now, there's a book that I'd really recommend reading, I know some of you might have read it already, called Good Vibes, Good Life. And it basically talks about vibrations. And I'm not going to get all arty-farty, but what I'm going to say is, if something bad happens to you and you are then pushed into that negative mindset and it just makes you miserable and you kind of dwell on it and it just completely consumes you, you will then find, because you're accepting those negative emotions, that negative energy, that even the smallest of things that probably wouldn't normally throw you will then become like a big thing. So you're kind of attracting the energy that you put out. So if you respond to a shit day with negative energy and a negative mindset, that's how that snowballs. Whereas if you respond to a shit day or a shit event or a shit couple of days with a more positive and a more positive mindset, you know, you kind of, not almost say like c'est la vie, but you just kind of deal with it and keep moving forward, you will find that if you have something else crop up, you know, that is not so great, you will be able to manage it a lot easier. So prime example for me was last week. Obviously had food poisoning, that was really shit, had to reschedule a load of work, basically missed a whole day of not being productive and not getting back into my into the swing of things and getting back into my normal routine. Then obviously having my flat tire, you know, like that's two things that actually, you know, I could have pretty much just written off the whole week from. And trust me, I wanted to just bin everything off and be like, no, I'm not going to bother. You know, I'm not going to bother with my food. I'm not going to do my best to get back into the routine. I'm not going to, you know, tick off my non-negotiables. And then rather than that be, you know, 1 or 2 days that actually were, really inconvenient, but it wasn't the end of the world, it could have been a week, right? And I'm not saying I'm perfect, to look at me like I can do it, but that's an example. You know, if I still had that negative mindset after having food poisoning, then I probably wouldn't have got my tyres sorted as quickly, you know, like getting some replacement ones booked in. You know, I would have just moped and, you know, it would be, you know, a big old, what's the word, whinge fest for me, because trust me, I like to whinge. So, yeah, really, it's how you approach these situations mentally that actually kind of A, prevent them from happening, or B, prevent them from worsening, essentially. But here's my little cycle. So there's 3 stages to tackling an event that has made life a bit difficult for you. It's increased your stress levels. It's thrown your routine out of whack. The first step is acceptance, and I'll go into these in more detail. The second step that you have to take is you then have to refocus your priorities, and then you execute and continue to evaluate. So I'm going to go into them in a little bit more detail. So acceptance is not to be confused with giving up. That's not to say, oh, well, I've had a shit day, so I'm just going to give up for the rest of the week. It's actually saying, yeah, okay, I've had a shit day, but it is what it is. I still, if you can apply these things, you have to find the silver linings in the situation. I can still walk, I still have my health. If you don't have your car, you can still walk, you can lift, share. It's not the end of the world, essentially. I know that's so patronising, but that's kind of what you have to say to yourself. You have to say, yeah, okay, it's happened. There's nothing I can do about it. All I can do is actually, control what happens going forward, control the things that I can actually control. And I just have to, say to myself, like, I can't change what's happened. It's happened now. So I need to then essentially decide where I want to go from here. And, as I said, shit weeks are inevitable. Once you've accepted it, you can decide to sink or swim. You can sink and say, right there, that's it. Like, that's just, blown everything out the water for the whole week. Or you can say, actually, it's salvageable. I can tread water a little bit. I might be able to swim towards the end of the week, but I'm going to be able to keep my head above water, essentially. I actually used this analogy, I can't remember to who it was this week, but, if you stubbed your little toe, it would hurt for, probably a day or a couple of hours. But would you then just say to yourself, well, I'm not going to walk for the rest of the week because I've stubbed my little toe? Essentially, and this is not me unvalidating or playing down bad things that happen, but essentially that's kind of how you have to look at it. You have to say, this is one blip in, 1 or 2 hours of the day, or 1 or 2 hours of the week, or this is one day out of 7 days a week. Am I going to let this one day define, or this one issue, or this one scenario, or this one thing that's come up define, okay, yeah, it might define the rest of the day, but it doesn't need to define tomorrow. It doesn't need to define the rest of the week, essentially. So that's kind of how you have to view it. And I kept these in actually from the last PowerPoint I made because they're really relevant. Like, you have to have a bit of self-compassion in these situations. Sit and think about the emotion, make space for that emotion. What do you need in order to keep progressing? What do you need from yourself? Is it self-compassion? Is it a bit of organisation? Do you need to have a stern word with yourself? What do you need in that situation emotionally, and physically and mentally? And if you mess up, it's okay. If you do just sack off Monday, Tuesday and, manage to pull yourself back on Wednesday, that's fine. But it's you will have to say to yourself in that situation, okay, yeah, I could have pulled myself out of that hole a little bit quicker. Going forward, I know what I need to do in order to do that. If you mess up, it's okay. Mistakes are meant to be made. You can learn from them. But, the main thing is obviously learning from them. So this is the acceptance phase. So bad thing has happened. I've got food poisoning. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm feeling pretty shit, but there's still things that I can do today, to kind of get me a little bit closer to my goal of wanting to get back into routine post-holiday. Some of them actually go hand in hand with recovering from food poisoning, i.e. making sure I'm getting back on my water or having something nutritious to eat, right? So that's, it happens, you draw a line under it, you decide whether you're gonna sink or swim, and then you basically come up with a plan of action to keep moving forward. So it's going to probably involve a refocusing of your priorities. So let's say, for instance, you have a flat tire, and it's a Monday, you've got a flat tire, you can't get it fixed until Thursday. So the first thing to do is say, right, what are my goals currently? I'm going to use fat loss as an example because the majority of you are in a fat loss phase. So you're in a fat loss phase. You're not going to be able to get to the gym, but you need to kind of keep your goal in mind so that you don't lose a whole week and then come your check-in, it's, terrible because you've not made any progress this week because it's, as I said, the acceptance, you chose sink. So what are my goals? My goals are fat loss. So I need to, even though, I can't necessarily go to the gym, I can't lift share with someone, I need to make decisions that are going to continue to take me closer to my end goal as much as I can. Now, let's say, for instance, if you can't get to the gym, but there's a local class that you could get to, great. And you go ahead and you do that and then they cancel that. You tried, you need to be gracious in defeat in that situation, because again, there's nothing you can do about it, so although you want to make decisions that are going to take you closer to your end goal, if you then encounter a further situation that is actually going to prevent you from making those decisions, you kind of have to say to yourself, okay, that's fine, it is just one day, or that's just one aspect of the activities I need to do to get me closer to my end goal. So make decisions that are going to take you closer to your goal. Now, using fat loss as an example, and I'll come into this, in a little bit, but focus on activities that are going to make the biggest impact to your goals. So again, using fat loss as an example, nutrition is the main thing. If you're not in a calorie deficit, you're not going to be losing fat. The second option then might be steps. If you can't train, you can't go to that gym class that you wanted to go to, or that other, that village yoga class that you were going to go to, steps is going to be the next best thing. Now, obviously, in a fat loss phase, nutrition and steps are the absolute bare minimum that you should be doing anyway, because those are the two most important factors in terms of, actually having fat loss progress, because they literally, without nutrition adherence, how do you know if you're in a calorie deficit? Steps are just something we need to be doing for general health anyway, but are, really easy to do, free. You don't need a car, don't take that long sometimes. So you're going to focus on activities that make the biggest impact to your goals. Then the next thing to say to myself is I need to prioritize my stress levels. So, what I need to think about here is if I don't get enough sleep, then I know that my cravings are going to be higher. I'm going to be more likely to want to, turn to more calorie dense foods. I'm going to be more likely to want to binge or eat mindlessly, or, so think about the things that are actually going to really impact your stress levels, because what you don't want to be doing in times when they're already elevated is elevating them higher. You want to keep them, at best at best you want to lower them, but as a bare minimum you want to kind of keep them at the same level. You don't want to be adding to your stress levels. So if that's a case of actually saying no to a couple of things because that's going to stretch you too thin and that's going to encroach on trying to get you one step closer to your end goal, then you don't do it. Asking for help from your partner, your friends, your family members, but prioritize your stress levels and focus on doing the activities that are going to make the biggest impact on your end goals. And, if they end up being the bare minimum, you have to say to yourself, do you know what, just for this 1 week, doing the bare minimum is fine, but as long as I'm doing that, that's the main thing, because doing the bare minimum is actually keeping you moving forward during that shit week or those shit days when, if you don't do the bare minimum, you're not going to be moving at all. So just keep your goals in mind. I'm not saying everything needs to be dropped and you need to just think of your goals, but at the end of the day, if you're doing a process, let's say to lose body fat, and that at the end of the week, if you don't feel like you've achieved something, that's going to make you feel worse, that's going to add to your stress levels. So I'm not saying you don't have to be completely rigid about them, but I'm just saying keep them in mind, because ultimately, if you can end the week and say, do you know what, I did the bare minimum, but I did what I could despite the circumstances, you're going to feel a lot better about yourself than if you decide to do nothing. So refocus your activity, refocus your priorities for that day in line with your stressors and what is actually achievable for you to do that day. Then you just need to execute, and you may need to reevaluate on a daily basis. Be an adult about it. Come up with a plan of action. Write it down if you need to, and then do it. There's no point in saying to yourself, I'm going to do it, and then not doing it, because, that's just then continuing to contribute to, your very crap week, and it's just going to add to those stress levels. It's going to add to those negative emotions, and, it's just not going to pull you out of that hole, in that sense. But be flexible. Accept that things might change. Accept that you might come up with a plan of action after you've refocused your priorities. Something might change, and then you're going to have to go back to that acceptance level of, right, something's happened. It is what it is. I need to refocus my priorities. And you may need to do that on a daily basis if you are, say you've got a really super busy week at work and it doesn't seem to be, letting up. Say something's gone wrong with the family. You know, you may need to do that on a daily basis, and I would recommend doing that in periods of really high stress. Draw out the battle lines, draw out what is actually going to be achievable for you to cover on that daily basis, and then do it. But constantly evaluate whether that is still the case, you know, on a daily basis. But do it, be an adult, continue to be flexible, you know, don't let further knockbacks, you know, like getting a flat tire after having food poisoning, be your demise. Continue to be flexible. If you are inflexible in life, then of course you're going to give up at the first hurdle because you don't really see a way to overcome it because you're so rigid and stuck in your thinking that this is the only way I can do it. But prove yourself wrong. And by doing this kind of activity is going to help you build discipline, because you are then going to be doing, you may even be doing activities that you don't want to do, but you know that you need to do them because it's in line with your goal, and you know that ultimately at the end of the week you'd much rather have done the bare minimum and felt okay about it than not done anything at all and then feel even more shit. So by doing that, it's going to help you build discipline. Prove yourself wrong. If your brain's like, you can't do it, you'll give up, prove yourself wrong. Have that battle with yourself. Have that argument with yourself. And it's just going to make it much easier in future situations where you might have to resort back to this cycle, because you've already done it once before and you know that you've got the confidence in your abilities to do it again. Right, so I've come up with some little safety nets. So these are basically, if you're having a really shit week and you need to kind of make, you know, adjustments to what you're doing, you know, in terms of your nutrition and your training. These are the routes that you can go down. So let's say, for instance, that you are following your meal plan at the moment. If there is a situation where you have meal prepped and you can't necessarily, you know, eat what you've meal prepped, the next best thing is to find the convenience foods on your plan. So most of you, in fact all of you, will have a ready meal. Ready meals are great. I would always have some in the freezer for those situations where, you know, you get home, you've had a really crap day, you don't want to cook, you really want a Domino's, but you're keeping your goals in mind and you're going to have, you know, I don't know, a Tesco tikka masala. And that is going to make you feel a lot better about everything because you've had something yummy, you haven't had to cook it, it's reduced your stress levels, it's calorie controlled, pre-portioned, there's no washing up, you can get to bed earlier, you've had something tasty that's, you know, slightly different to what you would eat normally. So that's what you would do in that situation. Find the convenience foods, you know, like there are so many on your meal plans that, you know, it's not difficult to find the convenience foods. And if you can't find any, all you need to do is message your coach. If you can't follow your meal plan, you know, you haven't got any meal prep, you left your meal prep at home, and you know, you don't know what to do, the next option is to track. Obviously some of you are tracking at the moment, so, you know, this is where you would start on this little safety net thing. Or if you can't track, you may even want to revert back to your meal plan. So these two can be interchangeable, really, depending on, you know, what you've got going on that day. If you can't track and your meal plan is still on the app and you can follow that, then that would be the next best thing to do. So these two are interchangeable. But if you can't follow your meal plan and you know how to track on MyFitnessPal, then tracking would be the next best thing, because you can, you know, buy something from a shop, scan it in, you know, you're still making an effort to control the calories that you're consuming on a daily basis, you know, and you'll find it a lot easier. You know, you might be able to hit your macronutrient targets quite easily if you just have to track for lunch. You know, it may just mean a couple of adjustments for dinner, or if you just have to track for breakfast, it might mean a couple of adjustments later on throughout the day. So tracking is the next best thing. If you can't track and you can't follow your meal plan, then the next best thing after that is just to be mindful of portion sizes and think about what you've learned from your meal plan in terms of prioritizing protein, getting a massive portion of veg in because we know veg is really low calorie and it fills us up, and then just being mindful of things that we know are higher fat or calorie dense. So, you know, dressings or sauces, anything that says creamy or crispy, or if it's fried, you know, think about the things that you know are going to be typically higher calorie. And I'm not saying don't eat them, but I'm just saying have a smaller portion of that. You know, and then with carbs, you know, a general good rule of thumb is I would always say have a carb portion that's the size of the palm of your hand. And that's quite a good way of just eyeballing something without it being, eyeballing something without it being like really ridiculous, and actually still kind of setting a bit of a boundary with it. So like have a carb size that's the portion of your hand. And if you can't do that, the main thing to remember is at the end of the day, calories are king. And this kind of goes with the tracking side of things as well. If you cannot hit your macronutrient goals perfectly, it's not a failure. At the end of the day, in a fat loss phase, what matters the most is how many calories you're eating. It doesn't matter what you make those calories up of. It could be, say you're on 1,500 calories, you could eat 1,500 calories of chocolate and you would still lose fat every day if you literally just ate 1,500 calories of chocolate, because at the end of the day, your body doesn't know what food it is. Obviously it knows what food it is, but that's not the main thing. What it's metabolizing is the calories. It's the energy content. So if you have a day where you don't hit your macros dead on, but you're within your calories, that's the bare minimum that you should be doing. Or if you have a day where you just need to be mindful of your calories, you can probably add them up in your head, or, you've had to do a combination of having mindful portion sizes and tracking. Ultimately, what matters the most is how many calories you are consuming. If you can keep that low as possible, if you're in a calorie deficit, or you're meant to be in a calorie deficit, that is what is going to keep you progressing. So at the end of the day, what matters the most in a fat loss phase is calories consumed. Obviously, we then break it down into, macronutrients important, protein fills you up, carbs give you energy, fats for hormone regulation. That's how we break it down. But at the end of the day, all your body cares about in a calorie deficit is how many calories you've consumed, and whether that is in a negative energy balance, i.e. whether you have burnt more calories that day than you've consumed. That's all your body cares about in terms of energy balance. Training wise, and I kind of went over this a little bit already, if you can't get to a training session, or you don't have time for like an hour long or an hour and a half long training session, and there's like a 30-minute gym class that you could do instead, that's high intensity, it's going to do you some benefit, it's using weights, it's using cardio, that's the next best thing, right? Very closely followed by, if you don't have time for an hour gym session, but you've got time for like 25 minutes, cardio is the next best thing after that, right? Because you're still doing something. Obviously, we know cardio is good for us health-wise. We know that it's optimal when you're in a fat loss phase to be doing cardio because it burns more calories than weights does. So if you can't do training, can't do your weight session, do a gym class. If you can't do a gym class, do a short cardio session. If you can't do a cardio session, do a home workout. On the app, there is a tab under guides and text documents that is called home workout videos. There's so many in there. There's 15-minute ones, there's hour-long ones, some with equipment, some without equipment, some that are low impact, so no jumping or anything like that. There's loads. There's literally loads in there. So that would be the next best thing after that. If you can't do those, steps. It's always steps, and that's the bare minimum. Like calories, steps is what you need to be doing every day. And if if 7,000 steps is your target and that's all you can do, then that's all you can do. But if you've got time to do, a 15-minute walk, or that you'll have opportunities where you might be able to get more steps throughout the day, i.e. parking further away, walking up the stairs instead of getting the lift, that kind of thing. If there's an opportunity to maximize how many steps you're getting, take that opportunity, because that's the last resort, and that's the bare minimum that you should be doing. Aim for an extra 3,000. That's a pretty manageable amount. That's a 15-20 minute fast walk, right? So that's the next best thing. So those are the safety nets. So at the end of the day, if you cannot complete the things that you would normally complete, steps and just focusing on how many calories you're consuming in some way are the absolute bare minimum that you need in order to continue making fat loss progress. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. There is actually a really handy little Instagram post I did here that was like basically what you need to focus on in a fat loss phase in terms of, priorities. And you can see here, calorie deficit, NEAT, steps, sleep and stress, training, very small portion. So yeah, but if you have any questions about this, guys, let me know. I hope you've enjoyed, and I will chat to you later.